Today, we're diving into a field that honestly can feel pretty chaotic, biomedical data. But we're not just talking about the chaos, we're looking at a really interesting project aiming to bring some order to it all, making, super complex biomedical data simple and accessible for basically everyone. And to do this, we've gathered info from all over the project's website, academic papers, YouTube videos, even Reddit discussions. We're going to distill it all for you.
Exactly. Our mission really is to unpack how this specific project, it's called BioniChaos, is trying to democratize biomedical data processing. We'll look at some of its innovative tools, and then connect that to the bigger picture, things like medical education and some pretty deep ethical questions around advanced neurotechnology. By the end, you'll have a really clear picture of what's happening in this really vital and fast-moving field.
Okay, let's jump right in then. BioniChaos. Tackling this chaotic world of biomedical data, making it simple, accessible. How exactly does it do that? How does it break down those barriers? So like anyone can engage with EEG, ECG data, maybe stuff from wearables, just on a laptop or phone.
Yeah, what's really key here is the gap it bridges. Historically, getting your hands on this kind of data, processing it, that meant specialized knowledge, expensive software, powerful computers. BioniChaos wants to democratize that whole process. Accessible, open-source tools, educational resources. It's built on values like accessibility, innovation, collaboration, education, and the fact that everything's under a Creative Commons attribution license that really says something and encourages people to use it, build on it.
And accessible really means accessible here. The tech side is, well, pretty clever. It's a self-contained platform. The code, mostly JavaScript, runs right in your web browser, which means, like you said, no downloads, no installs needed for the examples. It's all web-based. Responsive for mobile, too, though they do say it's best on a desktop. And importantly, they use de-identified public raw data, and they cite their sources for each tool. That feels like a big step for transparency.
Absolutely, and that accessibility opens the door to, well, a really diverse crowd. Researchers, students, sure, but also tech enthusiasts, healthcare folks interested in data science, BCIs, brain-computer interfaces, AI. The name itself, BioniChaos, kind of captures it, doesn't it? That sometimes chaotic result of combining biology and electronics. It actually started as a personal project, a biomedical engineer and scientist just wanting to get these tools out there more widely.
So what kind of processing are we talking about? What can you actually do with it?
It covers quite a range. Basic stats, naturally, but also more advanced stuff, like fuzzy logic that helps computers handle uncertainty, neural nets mimicking brain learning patterns, spectrograms, visualizing frequency changes over time, even image processing and classification. And the site has loads of practical examples, tools to understand signal features, predict events in the data.
Okay, practical tools.
But two really important caveats here. Need to stress these. First, it's experimental. It's not certified for clinical use, definitely not for diagnosis. It's provided as is.
Right. Good to know.
Second, and this is quite significant, absolutely no military use. The content, the tools, the resources, strictly off limits for military purposes. Their mission is clearly peaceful educational innovation.
Okay, non-military, non-clinical. Got it. Let's get into some of the tools then, the interactive applications. This sounds like where the learning really happens. The Lissajous Curves Visualization, you mentioned that one. Sounds intriguing.
Oh yeah, it's visually very engaging. Lets you explore the relationship between two oscillating signals, like two waves. You can tweak parameters A and B for frequencies, delta for the phase shift, and you see the curves change shape instantly.
So you can actually see the interaction.
Exactly. Like the example they give, a 1:5 frequency ratio. You literally see 5 vertical loops for every 1 horizontal loop.
Yeah.
It's quite mesmerizing.
Cool. So it's educational, but does it have practical uses?
Definitely, especially in EEG analysis. It gives you a visual way to check for symmetry between the brain hemispheres.
Ah, okay. So differences might signal something.
Precisely. Neurological abnormalities or just functional variations, maybe how the brain responds during certain tasks. And think about real-time monitoring, like during neurosurgery or in an ICU. You could potentially spot sudden changes in brain activity much faster.
Wow, okay. Real-time feedback.
Yeah. And it's useful in cognitive studies, too, comparing hemisphere activity, potentially even as a diagnostic aid for things like epilepsy prediction or stroke detection.
Fascinating. What about the synthetic EEG signal generator? Why generate fake EEG?
Good question. It's actually incredibly useful. This web tool lets you create artificial EEG signals. Think about it. You can test algorithms, new devices, even theories without needing actual patient data initially, which can be hard to get and has privacy issues.
Right, a safe testing ground.
Exactly. You adjust things like amplitude, bandwidth, window size, and you see the signal and its power spectrum visualized right there. So great for R&D, validating your processing methods, and of course for teaching and training.
Okay. And I read something interesting. It generates random frequencies within bands.
Yes, that's a clever touch.
Yeah.
It simulates the natural variability you find in real EEG signals. Makes the synthetic data more realistic for testing.
And this connects to AI and machine learning, right? BioniChaos seems to use AI quite a bit.
It does, in a couple of ways. First, AI tools like ChatGPT and GitHub Copilot were apparently used in developing the site writing code, generating text content.
Okay, behind the scenes.
Right. But also, some of the tools themselves use AI for analysis. Things built with TensorFlow or PyTorch, those big AI frameworks. The sources mentioned examples like AI-powered EEG speech decoding, and discussions about how AI and machine learning are changing EEG and ECG analysis. They even touch on the challenge of AI understanding why causality in large language models like ChatGPT.
So AI building AI tools and AI within the tools.
Exactly. And there's this great quote from the BioniChaos creator on Reddit, something like, "Great products aren't built on clever code, they're built on clean, reliable, boring data." I think that really nails a key insight in this field.
That's a good one. Clean data is king. What about the Cochlear implant simulator? That sounds very specific.
It is. It's a visualization tool showing how sound gets processed into electrical signals for the implant. And crucially, it simulates the physical insertion of the electrode array into the cochlea.
You can interact with that part.
Yeah, you can adjust parameters like insertion depth, the force being applied, the speed, all things that are critical in real surgery to avoid damaging delicate tissues.
Wow, and I saw something about robot-assisted insertion in the simulation.
That's right. The simulation allows for both manual, human-controlled insertion and robot-assisted insertion, which is interesting because currently it's mostly done by surgeons manually, so it's kind of looking ahead.
It really highlights how sophisticated this tech is getting, and the ethical side you mentioned earlier starts to loom larger.
Definitely. And these are just a few examples. The site has a whole suite of tools. Other signal generators, ECG, synthetic noise, lots of analysis tools, ECG feature extraction, EEG cross-coherence, fuzzy logic analysis for EEG, a 3D MRI viewer, gait analysis, something called myoscope for EMG muscle signals.
A lot to explore.
Yeah, and educational stuff too. Interactive brain EEG sims, Fourier series visualizations, a guide to EEG tech, even a hearing test, plus those games you mentioned,
Yeah.
CardioBot for spotting weird ECG patterns, and the Mastering the ECG game, which apparently gets crazy fast.
Okay, so ECG practice that gets intense.
Seems like it.
You know, the fact that BioniChaos includes these games, it feels like it taps into that bigger trend we hear about. Game-based learning, GBL, especially in medicine. How big a deal is this GBL approach becoming?
Oh, it's definitely a significant trend. GBL is basically about using game elements in non-game contexts to boost engagement and learning. You've got sort of two main flavors. Serious games. These are actual interactive applications, often simulations, with goals, scoring, designed to teach specific skills or knowledge.
Right, like flight simulators, but for medicine.
Kind of, yeah. And then there's gamification, which is more about applying game mechanics points, badges, leaderboards to existing learning activities to make them more motivating.
Yeah.
Layering game goals on learning goals.
Oh, and does it actually work in medical education? What are the benefits?
The research suggests, yes, it often does. The documented benefits are pretty compelling. Things like better collaboration among students, definitely higher engagement and motivation, which is huge, improvements in clinical reasoning, decision-making skills, even overall academic performance in some cases. And it provides a safe space for what's called deliberate practice, trying things, making mistakes without real-world consequences.
Can you give some examples?
Sure. The sources mentioned quite a few. Cleft Island and Emerge for surgical training, Pediatric Sim and Neo Games for pediatric care and neonatal resuscitation. These
I'm not sure if it's clear, but those, the ones that was just mentioned, they are not on bionichaos.com. They are elsewhere. So this is what's available in the public, not on bionichaos.com.
showed better long-term knowledge retention too. There was AntibioGame Array for learning antibiotic use. Apparently 96% of students liked it. A COVID game helped improve knowledge during the pandemic.
Even board games.
Yeah. Gridlocked, a board game about managing patient flow in the emergency department. And Happy Families, a card game for physiotherapy clinical reasoning. Even for continuing medical education, CME, there are spaced education games making that traditionally, let's be honest, sometimes tedious process more engaging.
Yeah, I can see how that would be more appealing. And during the pandemic, this must have been invaluable for remote learning, right? Keeping students engaged from afar.
Absolutely critical. When in-person clinicals and classes were disrupted, GBL offered a way to maintain interactive learning and engagement despite social distancing. It really surged in relevance then.
But it's not perfect, right? What are the downsides or challenges?
No, definitely not a silver bullet. There are limitations. Some studies, surprisingly, don't show significant short-term gains or even improved long-term retention compared to traditional methods.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and there's something called the expertise reversal effect. A game that works well for experts might actually confuse or hinder novices. Design matters hugely.
Makes sense. What else?
Well, cost and efficiency. Developing really good educational software, a polished, serious game, that can cost thousands, tens of thousands of dollars. You also need instructor training to use these tools effectively, plus ongoing technical support.
Resources, basically.
Right. And maybe the biggest challenge is evaluation. There isn't really a standard way to measure the specific impact of GBL. Lots of studies look at engagement, satisfaction, maybe simple knowledge recall tests, but they often miss higher-level outcomes. Does it actually change how doctors practice? Does it have a profound, lasting influence?
Deeper impact measurement is tricky.
Very. Plus, a lot of the studies have small sample sizes. We really need more large-scale multi-center research to get a clearer picture of its true effectiveness across different contexts.
Okay, so promising, but needs careful implementation and more research. Circling back to things like that Cochlear implant simulator and the potential neuroenhancements you mentioned earlier, it forces us to confront some really big ethical questions. When we talk about neural implants devices in or on the brain for therapy, like Parkinson's, epilepsy, OCD, what are the main ethical hotspots we need to think about?
It's a minefield, ethically speaking. A huge one is this line between therapy versus enhancement. Cochlear implants seem clearly therapeutic, right? Restoring hearing, same for deep brain stimulation, DBS for Parkinson's.
Yeah, restoring function.
But then you have companies, like Neuralink is often discussed, exploring implants potentially for cognitive or sensory enhancement in healthy people. That blurs the line dramatically, raises huge questions about fairness, societal impact. What does it even mean to be normal or human if some people have augmented abilities?
A slippery slope argument, almost.
Well, it's a serious concern. One study specifically looked at adaptive DBS, which adjusts stimulation automatically, and raised flags about using it for enhancement safety, naturalness, justice concerns. They basically said we need to understand the brain much better first.
Okay, therapy versus enhancement. What else?
Privacy and data security. This is massive. These devices could collect and transmit incredibly sensitive brain data, personal health information.
Like thoughts? Literally.
Potentially, yes. While major breaches in current things like cochlear implants aren't widely reported, the industry knows cybersecurity is paramount. Protecting that data is critical.
And there's consent, right? Especially if the person can't fully consent.
Exactly. Consent and autonomy. Ensuring truly informed consent is a challenge, especially when the long-term effects might not be fully understood. Think about children getting cochlear implants. Parents decide. But does that predetermine the child's identity, their connection to deaf culture versus the hearing world? It highlights the need for ongoing conversations as the child grows.
Difficult choices.
Very. And linked to that is equity and access. These are advanced, likely expensive technologies. Is there a risk they'll only be available to the rich, widening the gap between haves and have-nots? The cost of the device, surgery, follow-up, maintenance, it creates huge barriers, particularly in lower-income settings.
So potential for inequality.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And then there's a more philosophical angle. Identity and personality changes. Could these implants fundamentally alter someone's sense of self? We see this debated with cochlear implants. Recipients sometimes navigate a complex identity between deaf and hearing communities. Altering sensory input can profoundly impact self-perception.
How you experience the world changes who you feel you are.
It can, yeah. It's a complex interaction. And finally, dependency and device removal. What if someone becomes reliant on the device? What are the ethics around removal, especially if it's needed due to malfunction or infection?
Is removal common?
For cochlear implants, it's actually rare. A study looking at data from 1989 to 2021 found a pooled removal rate of about 4.7%, mostly for device failure or infection. The implants themselves are very reliable, high 5- and 10-year survival rates, like 95% and 94%. but the possibility of removal and the dependency aspect still raise ethical points.
Okay, so therapy versus enhancement, privacy, consent, equity, identity, dependency. Quite a list.
It really covers a lot of ground, touching on medicine, technology, society, philosophy.
So wrapping this up, we've gone from trying to make sense of biomedical data chaos with open source tools like BioniChaos, looked at how game-based learning is shaking up medical training, and then touched on these really profound ethical dimensions of neurotech. It feels like these fields are not just evolving separately, they're really starting to merge and interact in complex ways.
I think that's exactly right. And projects like BioniChaos, they're more than just code and data points. They're about empowerment, empowering individuals, researchers, students, you listening, to understand this stuff better, fostering a more informed, more collaborative future in biomedical science by making knowledge accessible.
It leaves us with a final thought, maybe. Perhaps the real chaos isn't just in the complex data itself. Maybe it's in how we, as a society, navigate the ethical maze that comes with these incredibly powerful, rapidly advancing technologies. So, thinking about everything we've discussed, what stands out most to you? How can you play a part, even just in understanding, and bringing some order to this fascinating chaos as these fields keep pushing forward?
Well, there's a human in the loop. If you have any questions, use the chat. Yeah, obviously in this case the bot AI is winning the human. Well, because the human wasn't paying attention as per usual. Can we recover and get back to into the game? I don't think so. I think it's too late. The bot is winning by miles. Interestingly enough, with this noise level that this signal has, the bot is also making some mistakes. So it made 9 misses and 3 false alarms. That's quite interesting, isn't it? That's fuzzy means that it's the algorithm. The AI is actually deterministic, and it's using fuzzy logic. So it's actually looking at the thresholds for different segments, amplitudes at different parts of the signal to determine if it's normal or abnormal ECG waveform.